The Babadook isn't really about a monster. It's about what happens when grief is ignored for too long, when it sits quietly in the background until it starts to change you. That's what makes it so effective. Instead of using a monster just to scare, the film uses it to reflect something deeper about the people it haunts. On the surface, it's about a mother and her son being tormented by a supernatural presence. But underneath, it's about grief, depression, and how unresolved trauma can reshape a person. Through Amelia's emotional distance, Samuel's belief in monsters, and the eventual manifestation of the Babadook itself, the film shows that when grief is ignored, it grows stronger. But when it's confronted, it can be managed rather than allowed to take control. The Babadook isn't just a monster in the house, it represents suppressed grief. And the film ultimately suggests that healing begins not by destroying that grief, but by acknowledging and living alongside it. Amelia begins the film as a decent mother. Not a particularly warm one, but she tries. She goes through the motions of motherhood, performing the routines expected of her. But there is a quiet disconnect between her and Samuel, and the film constantly visualizes this separation. At night, Samuel clings to her in bed, seeking comfort, but Amelia gently pushes him away, creating space between them. At the dinner table, they sit at opposite ends, physical distance filling a moment that should feel intimate. This separation isn't random. It's the shape Amelia's unresolved grief has taken. Samuel was born the same night her husband died, a moment where love and loss became permanently entangled. He becomes a living reminder of that night, and the love she feels for him exists beside a resentment she refuses to confront. And Samuel grows up inside that distance, trying to close it in the only ways he knows how. Samuel isn't an abnormal child. If anything, he's a child reacting to the emotional coldness around him. He's fascinated by magic tricks and spends his time building homemade weapons, something Amelia shows little interest in and regularly reprimands him for. But to Samuel, these weapons have a purpose. They're meant to protect them from monsters. He clings to this belief even as he grows older, because in a house shaped by grief and emotional distance, monsters don't feel entirely imaginary. In one scene, Amelia scolds him for believing in monsters. In response, Samuel desperately tries to perform a magic trick for her, begging for her attention. He ignores her frustration, producing a bouquet of flowers before gently touching her face and pulling her into a hug. Samuel isn't trying to scare his mother. He's trying to make her smile. He wants her attention. He wants connection. He wants to bring her joy instead of grief. Despite his good intentions, Amelia struggles with her son. Samuel's behavioral issues at school eventually reach a point where the administration wants him placed in a special program, something Amelia clearly doesn't believe will help him. Instead, she pulls him out of the school entirely, meaning Samuel will have to stay home until she can find somewhere else to take him. Outside of school, things aren't much better. Amelia's sister Claire clearly struggles to accept her nephew, but it seems she struggles more with Amelia's unresolved grief. And even Claire's daughter no longer wants to share a birthday party with Samuel, something that seems to have been the norm until now. Slowly, the world begins to shrink, not just socially, but emotionally. Every strained interaction pushes them further inward. Samuel's behavior and outspoken personality pushes others away, but they're also a reaction to the emotional environment inside the home, something Amelia helped create, yet seems unable to change. In a house this strained, something is bound to surface. And it's during one of those nights, when things already feel stretched thin, that Samuel pulls a book from the shelf Amelia doesn't recognize. Mr. Babadook. The book terrifies Samuel and deeply unsettles Amelia. She hides the book on top of a wardrobe, but the idea of the Babadook doesn't disappear so easily. The next day, Samuel insists he saw the monster in his closet. Amelia dismisses it as another one of his overactive fears, refusing to encourage the belief that something supernatural is actually in the house. Samuel, however, is completely convinced. He promises to protect his mother from the Babadook, treating it as something real and dangerous. In a way, he acts like an emotional alarm system. He reacts to the tension in the house before anyone else does. When Amelia tries to bury her grief, Samuel is the one giving it a shape. He notices the darkness long before she's willing to admit it exists. As Amelia is forced to spend more time at home with Samuel, that buried grief begins pushing closer to the surface. Her patience wears thinner, her frustration becomes harder to hide, and the emotional tension inside the house starts to build. Amelia refuses to entertain the idea that the Babadook could exist. But the more she tries to deny it, the more its presence begins to seep into their lives. After repeated attempts to destroy the book, it returns mysteriously to her. The book warns that once the Babadook enters their lives, ignoring it only makes it stronger, a warning Amelia is about to experience firsthand. As Amelia continues denying the Babadook, its presence begins to grow stronger. In the basement, where she keeps her husband's memory locked away, a hat and coat resemble the monster, suggesting that what she has buried is finally taking shape. During dinner, the tension continues as they eat bland porridge and toast, Amelia finding glass shards in her bowl, which Samuel insists the Babadook caused. But this escalation doesn't exist in their mere isolation. At the same time, Amelia is barely sleeping. The stress of raising Samuel alone, combined with her refusal to confront what's happening, leaves her exhausted and constantly on edge. Sleep deprivation erodes her patience. Small frustrations become intense reactions. Without proper rest, her ability to distinguish fear from reality begins to weaken. The Babadook doesn't just grow stronger. Amelia becomes more fragile. And the less she sleeps, the more space the monster has to take hold. With Amelia's paranoia increasing, every sound feels intentional. Shadows seem suspicious. The house feels less like a home and more like a threat. Amelia hallucinates a hole behind the fridge, filled with insects seeping in. It reinforces this sense of decay. Something has been festering beneath the surface, slipping through the cracks of the home. The bugs feel symbolic of the grief Amelia has been suppressing all along. Then one night, as she lies in bed with Samuel, the Babadook refuses to be ignored any longer. The moment it forces itself into her mouth makes the metaphor undeniable. The monster doesn't just haunt Amelia, she swallows it. Grief is no longer something she can push aside. It has entered her, living inside her and shaping her from within. This internal shift erupts the next morning in an angry outburst toward Samuel, breaking their fragile trust. She later tries to repair the damage by taking him for lunch. On the drive home, the Babadook appears on top of the car, causing her to crash. The accident forces her to relive the trauma of losing her husband, visually linking the monster to that original moment of grief. From this point on, the Babadook is no longer confined to the house. It moves with her. It's become part of her. As Amelia's transformation deepens, her behavior becomes increasingly cold toward those trying to help. Gracie, the concerned neighbor who once relied on Amelia for support and even watches Samuel, begins to notice the change. Early in the film, their relationship feels cooperative. They support each other. But as the Babadook's influence grows, that connection deteriorates. When Gracie expresses concern, Amelia responds with irritation and defensiveness, pushing away one of the last links she has to the outside world. This growing hostility reflects her internal state, something she can no longer suppress. Despite the monster's presence, Amelia continues to deny it, refusing to acknowledge what is happening to her. But the violence described in the book soon unfolds when she lashes out at both Bugsy and Samuel. It becomes a disturbing turning point, confirming that the story was never just exaggeration. It was a symbolic warning of what repressed grief could become. The pain she refused to confront has turned outward, harming the people and dog closest to her. It's Samuel who ultimately interrupts the cycle. Refusing to abandon his mother, he remains by her side and grounds her in reality. His persistence becomes the emotional anchor that allows her to regain control, demonstrating that connection, not denial, weakens the Babadook. In the basement, where her husband's memory and the root of her grief is stored, Samuel disrupts the possession of his mother. Samuel tells her that he knows she doesn't truly hate him, that the Babadook has clouded her feelings, but he will always love her. It's a vulnerable moment of acceptance. Through his reassurance and physical presence, she begins to break free from the monster's influence. In the film's final confrontation, after saving Samuel from the monster, Amelia stands face to face with the Babadook and refuses to give it power. She calls it nothing, rejecting the identity of fear and repression that once controlled her. In doing so, she acknowledges it directly for the first time, weakening its hold. The monster flattens, and despite Samuel's protests, Amelia approaches it, understanding that it cannot truly be destroyed. It rises as a bright light, roaring in her face before retreating to the basement, the same space already associated with her husband's memory and buried grief. A couple days later, it's Samuel's birthday, and for the first time he is able to celebrate it properly. Amelia appears to have accepted not only Samuel for who he is, including his resemblance to his father, but also the grief she's been carrying. Instead of trying to eliminate the Babadook, they chose to contain it, feeding it insects and keeping it in the basement. This decision is significant. The Babadook isn't destroyed. It's managed. By confronting it rather than denying it, Amelia begins the process of healing, and in doing so, strengthens her relationship with Samuel. By the end of the film, it becomes clear that the Babadook was never something that could simply be defeated. When Amelia confronts it and calls it nothing, she finally acknowledges the grief she has been suppressing all along. Rather than erasing it, she and Samuel contain it. The monster remains, but it no longer dominates their lives. The monster doesn't disappear, but by facing it, Amelia proves that grief doesn't have to control a life in order to exist within it. The Babadook ultimately suggests that denial only strengthens pain, while acceptance, however uncomfortable, allows healing to begin. The only way to defeat a monster is to stop trying to destroy it. I truly love this film. It's one of those movies that makes me fall in love with good storytelling, especially in a horror movie. It's profound and impactful with its messaging, and is technically, in terms of cinematography, just stunning to watch. I absolutely love the design of the Babadook. The characteristics they gave him make him creepy and just very unsettling. And it's a good representation of grief, depression, unresolved trauma. The acting is incredible too. Like, you truly feel for Amelia, and a lot of people think Samuel is this annoying kid, but keep in mind the film is from her perspective, and she's going through a lot of emotional turmoil, so she's gonna think her kid is annoying, but I think he's just a normal kid. You know, he's got a mom that isn't really present with him. Like, she's there, but she's not present. So, I love this movie. Honestly, it's so good. I'm very impressed overall with it. A lot of great practical effects with the Babadook. Its storytelling is profound and carefully crafted. This is just another film I could go on for hours about. There's a lot of details I didn't include in this analysis that I wish I could have, but this video would have been like an hour and a half long then. But maybe in the future I'll revisit it and go into more depth with the other details I couldn't include this time. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this analysis. I had a really good time revisiting the film and writing the script, so I hope you enjoyed it as well. And I will catch you in the next one.